Okay, welcome everybody to the latest edition of Lemongrass Live. Today's topic is enterprise automation, unlocking efficiency, security and transformation. I'm delighted to be joined today by a panel of experts from Lemongrass who will be sharing their insights on how automation is transforming operations in the cloud. We've got three speakers with us today. Our first is David Patty. Would you care to introduce yourself, David?
Hiya, I'm Dave Patty. Thanks for the intro, Ian. I'm the Director of Platform Engineering, so I'm responsible for the automation of the infrastructure and our SAP business services.
Thank you, David. Dave Manning.
CISO at Lemongrass, responsible for keeping Lemongrass and our customers safe from cyber threats.
Thank you, Dave. And Andrew Jurek.
Hi, my name is Andrew Jurek, and I run the advisory practice globally for Lemongrass.
Thank you all. So today's business landscape is demanding unprecedented levels of operational agility and efficiency. Cloud's fundamentally changing both what's possible within enterprise automation and also how organizations should think about automation. This is putting a lot of those organizations under pressure to innovate faster, but still maintain security and compliance. The discussion today is going to explore enterprise automation can address all of these challenges. So first, to kind of keep things close to our hearts, and always saying you should look inward first, David Patty, would you mind telling us a bit about Lemongrass and how we've adopted enterprise automation and where this journey began?
Excellent, thanks, Ian. Well, the journey began at least 8 years ago now with our first foray into automation of AWS and building SAP in the cloud with a little tool called B&O. Our attempts here were to take a very monolithic application and cloudify it and bring the agility, scalability, and speed to the services that we were offering.
Sounds ambitious.
Yeah, it
SAP
was.
Not exactly famed. Well, they're not exactly famed for being nimble, are they?
No, it's really not the most desirable tool to automate in the cloud. If I'm perfectly honest, I don't think anyone would mind me saying that. When the SAP was built, it was designed for an on-prem landscape where you would have very large systems that would be running for a long period of time, and you had a lot of stickability. We needed to shift gears with that and see how we could break it down to bring those other cloud benefits.
Excellent. Big goals then. So you're not on the half measures front.
No, we really wanted to see how we could make SAP immutable. So we threw that up on the whiteboard, and thankfully nobody said what is immutable. But for anyone watching who's wondering, the aim here was that we could get to a point where we could do blue-green deployments. And by that, I mean that we didn't worry about the SAP system continuing to exist, but we would destroy that SAP system and replace it with another one with little to no downtime. Very similar to the way you would do so with an auto-scaling group and a web server.
Amazing. Sounds like a big old improvement. How long have you been at it for?
We had an early platform called B&O, but that was very AWS specific. And then we had a lot of clients coming to us saying, we really want Lemongrass's expertise in the cloud, but can you help us with Azure and GCP as well?
So leveraging that across the clouds must have been quite tricky. So when did that multi-cloud light bulb go off then?
So about 4 years ago, we shifted to multi-cloud, and we realized that in order to address this challenge, we would have to look at the data model first and create an application that would combine the efforts that we were trying to create and make this hybrid approach to managing the infrastructure as non-specific to those clouds as possible, while still getting the benefit of the native solutions that were being offered by each of the individual clouds. In order to achieve this, we had to split our teams across each of those different clouds, but we had a central group providing the architecture, the naming standards, and by pulling all that together with the UI, it kept the feeling consistent.
Excellent. So kind of a complete inclusion policy across the hyperscalers, but presumably with a bit of added intelligence from us matching the requirements.
That's right. We also introduced to the teams this idea of infrastructure as config. Right? The idea behind infrastructure as config, and you'll have heard the term infrastructure as code, was to really make our teams think about the fact that we don't want a one-to-one relationship with a resource being declared in code and something that we create. We need to be highly configurable because each of our clients has different enterprise standards. So if we're not, if we're opinionated about the way that we build things, and we've got things stuck in code, we aren't highly configurable. Because what we need to build is a landing zone and a system that looks like yours and not ours.
So it's up to you to kind of manage the consistency across all three clouds, and I guess all three hyperscalers, or the big three hyperscalers, tend to do things a little bit differently. How do you keep everything consistent?
We keep things consistent by having this a group that runs across the top, and that they're responsible for those naming conventions that I mentioned earlier, and also responsible for one of our core beliefs around cord cutting, where we believe that the environment that we're building should be operated and look very similar to the environment of our customers, so that we can walk away with confidence that not only we can support it, but they can support it as well.
Excellent. That sounds a bit different for the consulting industry, refreshingly unclingy. Most consultancies would want to be able to put something in place that allows them to stay around forever.
Exactly. Well, we avoid that also by using open source tools. We use Terraform for infrastructure and Ansible for the SAP config. And so all of this code lives inside your environment along with your specific configurations. So there are no black boxes. You can read the code that we've deployed and see the configuration, which allows you to go it alone if you can.
Excellent. But like any good recipe out there, there's got to be a bit of secret sauce in there. Your grandmother's old recipe for something. Is that what differentiates us as Lemongrass?
Yes, we've got two aspects to it. Andrew's going to be talking later about the advisory practice and how we would help enable an organisation to make use of the tools and the changes that we're bringing to an environment. But we also bring to the table our LCP platform, which is a SaaS interface that sits over the top of our CI/CD pipeline engine. And this is really important because that's what gives us the real-time visibility, the ability to execute the actions, and the feedback loop, which is the real secret sauce. And this is where we detect the changes in the underlying cloud, things that might have been done directly in the platform itself. And whilst one of the benefits of automation is for us to move away from the console, it's still possible that we'll have a break glass situation where somebody might extend a disk in a P1 situation. Now, in that situation, we can't then perform another action later and build the system with a smaller disk, accidentally shrinking it. We need to have this feedback loop in place so that the next execution knows the right size and we don't try and reset it again.
That's a pretty genius catch then. So you get fewer oh no moments if and when automation gets a bit too clever for itself.
Exactly. We've got to respect the reality of hybrid operations. We've got SAP basis people making changes, got infrastructure people making changes, and whilst we want the pipelines to own everything they can, we do have a way of working around those problems.
Excellent. Sounds fantastic. Well, I love the thought that Lemongrass has spent 8 years building some pretty serious IP, and yet we're not locking people in. Effectively, we're offering freedoms and not chains. Is that right?
Yeah, it's one of our key differentiators. We build the cloud automation that you can actually own. And if you decide to move on, well, we'll have set you up for success, and our advisory practice can also step in at that point and ensure that you are able to operate it and advise you on the best way to make use of the tools that we've created for you.
Fantastic. A rare thing in consulting these days. Just a final point, just looking at the consulting models of old, where consultants would be the owners of the intellectual property, the owners of the intelligence on how to do something. They would come to an organization, they would do it to the organization, and then they would walk away with all that knowledge. So I guess what we're saying here is we want to leave behind as much as possible, and that if the customer chooses to take over the running and management of their environment themselves, they have a fairly easy exit path to do that. Is my understanding correct?
Yep, spot on. We have no black boxes. What we deploy in the customer's environment is everything that you would need to continue operating that environment yourself. And if we've done our jobs right and we've specified the landing zone correctly, it will even look like the environment that you manage on your side of the fence in the rest of your IT operations. And your SAP landscape won't be completely different.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, David. So if I can just ping to Dave Manning, as our CISO, hearing a lot of what David's just said about automation and allowing the systems to self-heal, etc. What's the meaning to you as a CISO in that field?
Yeah, well, I absolutely love automation because it ensures that we're provably consistent. Everything's deployed in a known state, and we've virtually eliminated configuration drift. And one of a CISO's biggest headaches is always knowing what you have and knowing what state it's in, and automation does make that much easier.
Well, that's a new phrase on me. Configuration drift.
Yeah, configuration drift is where an environment drifts from its design state. So you think you've got it set up in a secure way because that's what your design docs say, but reality is different. And this is usually because people have made manual changes, kind of the hybrid approach that David was talking about. Administrators have logged in to update things or to resolve incidents, and they've left it in a different state to your design. Now, these compound over time, and before you know it, there's some unknown security flaw because, say, a port was opened up or a network path was added by an administrator to solve one particular issue, and then nobody went back and confirmed the environment's still satisfying its security requirements.
So we still have that old humans are the most fallible and the weakest link in the chain, is it?
Well, personally, I don't really like that phrase, and not because I think all users are blameless. I've been in this game long enough to know better than that. It's because whether we're in product or operations or security, we're all systems engineers, and humans are as much a part of that system of systems as virtual machines and firewalls are. And a good systems engineer will take all that into account when thinking about design constraints. If humans are going to make human errors, you want to engineer as much of that as possible out of the system, and you can do that through automation.
So humans not the problem then?
Well, I don't know any developers or system admins who come into work to deliberately break things. Well, maybe red teamers are an honourable exception. But everyone's on the clock. They've got things to get done before they can go home. Their customers have got KPIs around uptime, and they need to get stuff working again as quickly as possible. So it's only human to look at this massive list of rules that some security person has given you and see it as a bit of a luxury burden that gets in the way of achieving your tasks.
Yeah, who said CISOs have got no empathy then, did they? But it sounds like you're saying you understand why people don't follow the rules, but you need those rules in order to keep everybody secure, surely.
Yeah, we absolutely do. I just don't think that shouting at people is usually the most effective way to make that happen.
You mean like security being regarded as the Department of No?
Yeah, right. Security must never be seen as the Department of No, because it's entirely counterproductive. We need to know what's going on if we're to have any chance of securing it. And we can't do that if everyone's hiding from us because they think we're the enemy and we're going to get in their way. We're all one team. It is in all of our interest to keep us and our customers secure, and that is always going to be a collaborative effort.
Indeed. So where does the automation come into this then, in your viewpoint?
Think of it this way. Why do racing cars have brakes if brakes just slow you down? Brakes give the driver control in the corners and allow them to operate safely at high speed. And security controls are exactly the same. They allow us to operate safely at high speed. And the way you do that is by building paved roads with guardrails.
Racing cars, paved roads, guardrails. Are we still on the same topic, Dave?
Yeah, it's car analogies all the way down. We don't ask our developers to remember this huge list of security rules they have to keep in their heads and apply to every line of code they write. That would be impractical. We do it for them. Remember, people are, sorry, David, lazy. They'll follow the path of least resistance, like water flowing downhill. If you automate security and you make it easy for everyone, that's the path they'll follow, and we all win. So we bake security into our tooling so it all just happens.
Okay, and how does all this fit into the big picture then?
Well, I'm a huge fan of CISA's Secure by Design initiative. In fact, we signed the CISA Secure by Design pledge last month to prove our commitment.
Okay, don't think I've come across that yet. Not that I'm a bad citizen and I'm out there doing dangerous things, but what is secure by design in your view?
The Secure by Design is the US government's opinion on how you make secure IT products. It's a response to the poor state of security in the IT industry in general. So let's go back to car analogies again, since you love them so much. If you buy a car, you expect it to have been designed and built to be safe. A modern car company would never get away with telling you that it's your problem if your car has major safety flaws, because there'd be recalls and lawsuits. And yet, in most cases today, it is your problem if you buy insecure software. That's a terrible outcome, and it needs to change, and this is seen as the way to do it. Now, it won't happen overnight. It took a lot of work to get the automobile industry to the point they are at now, and the IT industry is now on the same journey.
Always love the theory, Dave. But what does it actually look like in practice then?
Okay, so there are two stages: secure by design and secure by default. Secure by design means that you've designed and built the thing properly. It means it follows industry good practice in software design. It doesn't have any known vulnerabilities when it pops out of your development pipeline and so on. And we automate this by building security controls that we've defined as code into our pipelines. It doesn't even build if it doesn't satisfy those controls that we've defined.
That actually sounds a bit good. And secure by default?
Oh yeah, secure by default means that it comes secure out the box. So you don't have to spend ages tweaking and configuring it to make it secure. Our automation achieves this goal in the same way as secure by design. By defining our controls as code, or sorry, config, as Dave would say, we know that they're in place when our automations finish their work, and we can use other automation to verify that they're still in place and working in the target environment.
Okay, but Lemongrass not being just a products company, how does this keep our day-to-day operations secure as well?
Yeah, you're right. Secure by design and default is CISA's model, and because we're a managed service provider, we've added an additional stage on the end, which we call operate securely. Operate securely is about what we do after we've deployed. It's how we manage that environment to ensure that it maintains that secure posture that we've defined. This includes good vulnerability management, but also how our people operate in that environment.
I thought you said earlier that you wanted to automate away from human error.
Yeah, we absolutely do. But of course, as David said, this isn't easy in the world of SAP because most SAP basis functions are still pretty manual in nature. Now that is changing, and there's still a lot we can do with automation to give us those layers of defense.
Like what?
One example is the evolving way that our consultants perform their work on those servers. So years ago, back in the dark ages, we'd give them credentials to log in and off they'd go. Then along came privileged access management, or PAM, to ensure that only the right people could access those servers and that they didn't retain enduring privileges and that their actions were monitored and audited. Now that's an improvement, but it still doesn't solve the problem of configuration drift. So the next evolution is to remove console access altogether and have them orchestrate automations. And our colleague David knows a thing or two about that.
Indeed. And one of the ways that we're solving that problem was that feedback loop that I spoke about earlier. So where changes are being made on the local operating system, we're also capturing those, and where they're not acceptable, in the event that we redeploy that system, we will wipe away that drift, but we will warn that there was that change going to take place.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. Thank you, Dave. All great stuff. But our world is one of constant evolution. 8 years, you said you've been working on this, David, so I'm guessing that the next 8 years will be looking quite rosy. So in our constantly evolving profession, presumably enhancements are always coming that even brighter. So probably to Andrew, as our head of advisory and looking into the future, can you give us an idea of what that future may hold for automation? And if you give us a perspective on both, maybe within Lemongrass in our home and also the wider markets out there.
Okay, I'll try to touch on those topics. So the next evolution of automation for Lemongrass is to augment some of that automation with AI. Right? So I'll give you two examples of things that we're working on at the moment. The first one is using AI for operational insights. So this started by us looking at and analyzing ticket histories. So by reviewing those tickets and identifying the right solution, if the right solution or approach was taken, we could then determine if there was anything else that we could do better in the future. So now we're using AI to help suggest what possible resolutions could be based on past events. AI is also being used for identifying the types of incidents that customers have. And this creates a backlog for additional automation, which Dave's team can then implement. A traditional example of this that most people are familiar with would be something along the lines of password resets. The industry as a whole has largely solved that by self-serve password resets. But there's lots of other similar activities which are ripe for additional automation. And understanding where time is being wasted on repetitive tasks and automating them is a great way of looking at it.
Sounds great. So looking at, I guess we're talking about low ops, no ops, kind of freeing up that resource on an operational situation. So a simple example that I always think of is the problem that's been in place for years, where scope creep has allowed a storage entity to run out of space. So I guess AI could just allocate more space to it. But I'm also presuming that if you just keep allocating more space via an automated function, that eventually your bills are going to be huge to manage. So can AI put some governance on top of that, or an authorization matrix or something like that?
Yeah, so the AI isn't designed to go and replace all humans, but it's used as a tool, right? So AI can be actively looking at what's happening from a trending perspective and point out any anomalies. Where previously you used to have threshold warnings that were set, and eventually the warnings would just overwhelm the operations people, right? So AI can help sift out some of those false positives.
So we take the unlimited storage function away, and AI just basically puts the intelligence on top of that function.
Correct, yes.
Fantastic.
The other area that we're looking at is more inside SAP itself. So there's a challenge when moving to S/4HANA or the RISE environment, and SAP is advocating a clean core approach, right? So that's effectively getting rid of a lot of the technical debt of the custom code, which has been built up over years and years. And traditionally, this cleanup takes a large amount of time because you have to review and understand what that custom code was doing. And typically there's lots of meetings and workshops with all of the functional people where you're starting typically with a blank sheet of paper and reviewing what those things actually did. So we're looking at using AI to be able to identify not only what the code is and how frequently it's used. That's pretty standard these days. But also to be able to go and inspect the code and identify what the code is actually doing. So the goal is to have the functional specs written by the AI from the code itself. And that should accelerate the conversations we have with functional experts to say, look, we think this is what the code is doing, and that way we're just filling in the blanks as opposed to starting from a blank sheet of paper. And we can do all kinds of other things. For example, we can go and say, this code that was written for ECC and the functionality of that code is performing is now actually just a standard function in S4. So we can eliminate the need to continuously maintain loads of custom code.
Excellent. It sounds like a bit of a nirvana of it being able to solve all the low-hanging fruit problems. But there must be challenges to adopting these solutions. What would be your answer to that?
Sure. So one of the challenges we find is that automation touches a lot of different areas. And it touches the infrastructure space that Dave was talking about. It also touches a lot of things in the operations space that David works in. And when you touch all these various areas, you really want to focus on not only on how things are being done, but whether they should be done in a particular way. So part of the solution that we bring or the expertise that we bring is how to go and integrate all of those chains together so that nothing is left out or missed.
Okay. And I've always thought of AI as a little bit scary in the background, and customers with their risk and audit boards must be looking at what's the potential exposure to risk on this. Is there an approach where clients can deal with those adoption challenges as well as the automation?
Yes. So from an adoption perspective, I think we touched on a little bit of this earlier. Really, it's about setting up the correct guardrails so that the automation can help enhance how people work, but maintain that level of safety. Also, maintaining a clear understanding of what exactly the automation is doing. Those would be the big challenges that we go through.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So if I was to run back across and summarise, David Patty looked at Lemongrass's 8-year journey, how we've developed our automation platform, which evolved firstly from the AWS specific solution into a genuine multi-cloud approach. He introduced the concept of infrastructure as config, which was a new one for me, rather than infrastructure as code, emphasizing the importance of flexibility and customer-specific configuration. This approach has allowed Lemongrass to adapt to each customer's enterprise architecture standards while still ensuring consistency across our entire portfolio. The Lemongrass Cloud Platform provides a user-friendly SaaS interface with real-time feedback on the workloads for the customers. It features critical feedback loop that captures changes made directly in the cloud within SAP systems or at the operating system level, depending on what your preference is. This prevents configuration drift and ensures deployment consistency. Dave Manning then went on to add and explain how automation addresses one of the biggest security challenges, which was configuration drift. And by eliminating manual changes and ensuring consistent deployments, security postures typically remain intact. He emphasized that security should never be seen as the department of no, but rather an enabler of safe, high-speed operations. And I can't wait for that day. Dave described Lemongrass's approach to security really in 3 phases: secure by design, which is building security into the development pipelines; secure by default, which was ensuring our systems are secure out of the box; and how to operate securely, maintaining our security posture through vulnerability management and operational practices. We then heard from Andrew, who outlined how AI is augmenting automation efforts in 2 key areas. First one was operational insights, using examples of analysing previous ticket histories to suggest resolutions and to identify patterns that could benefit from additional automation in the future. He went on to talk about using AI for code analysis, so using that to understand legacy SAP custom code that's been built up over many years. Customers have invested much time in, and being able to generate functional specifications and be able to accelerate an S/4HANA migration by identifying where that custom code could be replaced by standard functionality. The panel in general agreed that successful automation requires broad stakeholder involvement across infrastructure, operations, and security teams, with clear adoption plans and metrics to ensure knowledge transfer and proper implementation always. So in closing, the speakers emphasised that automation should be viewed as an ongoing journey rather than as a one-time project, with continuous improvement driven by operational feedback and emerging technologies. So it just leaves me time to give my enormous thanks to our 3 panelists. Thank you for your knowledge. They are available for a conversation should you require it. The easiest way to do that is to scan the QR code and give us a shout, and we would certainly be more than happy to discuss any points you have going forward. Thank you all for your time today, and thank you again to the panel of experts.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you everyone for watching.
Thank you very much.